So, rainy day here in Northern California, and working on my rain bike, and thought while it was up on the stand, I would give you all a quick tour around it. I've had this bike for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. This is a 1972 Motobecane Grand Record that I bought from a friend in New Mexico. He had it for a long time and decided to sell it. Interesting frame. It's made out of Reynolds 531, so tubes, forks, and stays. Put together up here, as you can see, with Nervex lugs. Nicely made frame, rides really well. It's a very comfortable bike. It just handles very nicely. This one, as I said, is my rain bike. It's, well, you can tell I've been riding it in the rain. It's filthy right now. It's a little, well, let's say cosmetically challenged. The paint is not the best. I've kind of polished it up, cleaned it a lot from when I got it, but it does have its share of sort of, nicks and scrapes and whatever. I kind of like it. Interestingly, if you can see down here, the bike originally came out of a bike shop in Oakland or somewhere in the East Bay, ended up in New Mexico, and now it's back here relatively close to where it came from. So I've got this set up as a 3-speed. That's actually back here. I'll turn it a little bit. That is a S3X. That is Sturmey Archer's fixed gear hub. And what I've done is on the outside of it, I've taken off the splined cog and spun on a 1-speed White Industries freewheel. And you can do that very easily. It's already threaded to accept a threaded on cog. And what that does is it turns it into a 3-speed hub. The advantage of this system too is that the internals of the S3X hub are a lot simpler. They're a lot stronger. They're made to be ridden as a fixed gear, and there's no pawls or ratcheting on the inside of that hub. All of the ratcheting and the freewheeling takes place here on the outside with the freewheel. What that means is if anything ever went wrong, and the White Industries hub is basically pretty bomb-proof, but if anything went wrong with that, you just take that whole free hub off, put another one on, and you're ready to go. It also means that when you're pedaling, there's no noise. A Sturmey Archer hub will normally make some ticking noise when you're pedaling. This one, if you can hear, is totally silent. The only time it makes noise, obviously, is when you're freewheeling, but that's just like any other bike. So 3-speed hub there, it's geared for somewhere around maybe 76 inches in the top gear. That's what I usually ride in. Second gear is lower than that, something like 60 odd inches, and the lowest gear gets down into the low 50s somewhere. So it makes the bike a little more versatile and able to be ridden over a little more terrain than would normally be the case. That all shifts up here with the Sturmey Archer bar end shifter that's indexed. There's second gear, and then low gears up there. So that's all set up to go. On the front here is a Son hub. Actually, for kind of a cosmetically challenged bike, this has one of the best generating and lighting systems on any of my bikes. So that hub is driving an Edelux light up here. Show you that, there we go. And I've run the wiring back along the frame here to a rear light, just because I end up riding this bike in either inclement or dark conditions. It tends to rain up here in the wintertime, so that's when it goes out a lot. I put a Velo Orange crankset on here. This is kind of a knockoff of a strong light, that kind of typical strong light design on here. This was originally a double crankset. I didn't need the other ring, so I just took that off, put shorter bolts on here to hold everything together. Works just fine. Brooks saddle underneath there is a Simplex seat post that came with the bike. Really needed that because, as I recall, everything on this bike is basically French fittings, which are slightly different than what you're used to seeing. as I always like to say, not different enough to make a difference, just different enough to be a pain in the butt when you're trying to find something to fit. This is a normal stem that I took and just took a little bit of sandpaper to it, sandpapered it down to make it just ever so much smaller to be able to fit into the French steerer. Fenders on here came from a friend of mine who sold them. Actually, he passed away and got these from his estate. So always think of him when I'm riding it. No braze-ons on this frame. If you can see, the bottle cages here are both held on with old school clamps. The brake cable up here is held on with clamps. So that was just how they did it back in the day. I think they felt at that time that brazing fittings onto the frame weakened it, so they just didn't put them on. And that's just how you got it. Up here at the top, fairly nice assembly. Again, the Nervex seat cluster here, nicely done. Ends of the seat stays. Nice brazing where everything comes together down here, but as I said, really dirty. The rear wheel, by the way, was part of a set that I got from a place in Texas. I think it was called Bike Island. Came as a set front and rear wheels. So I ended up replacing the front wheel with this one here with the lighting setup. But those were actually pretty inexpensive wheels. It lasted forever. These Alex rims are tall and really strong, and it really takes bigger tires like these. These are, I believe, 30s or 32s on here, I forget which, to get a little bit more comfort out of that rear wheel. The Mayfac Racer brakes, these are obviously the bolt-on version. I've got the same brakes on both of my Alex Singer bikes, but with the brazed-on version that eliminates this whole piece here, the yoke that goes between the two arms and then bolts onto the frame. On the Singers, it's a much more elegant, lighter setup. I have to say that these brakes on this bike work just fantastically. The Racers are just a great brake. They're not the most, I don't know, refined thing to look at. You know, they're kind of flat and stamped looking, but gosh, they sure work great. And these have probably been on the road for, who knows, 30 or 40 years, probably about as long as the bike has, and they still just work perfectly. The brake levers, by the way, just a little story about those. The friend that I bought this bike from had a René Erse. These levers came off of that bike, so hey, if that means anything to you, these levers were at one time on a very nice French bike, and they have still the original just sort of half covers on the top, just enough to give yourself some padding when you're holding onto the levers. So one thing I really enjoy about the Rain bike is it proves that you don't need to have a really pretty bike. You don't need to have something that's shiny and, you know, nice looking with all the bling on it to go out and have a lot of fun on a bike. I've had a lot of fun riding this bike. You can take it anywhere. If I'm down along the river, I can take it along there. I can go off on some trails because it has slightly wider tires. I don't need to worry about scratching it because, well, it came pre-scratched when I had it. So it's just a really fun bike and proof that it's not always just how the bike looks. It's really how it rides, how it's put together, the geometry that it has, and just whether you like riding it or not. So hope you enjoyed the tour around the bike. See you next time. Bye.